a few symptoms a minute back. I want you to think of yourself or think of somebody you know, maybe fatigue, skin rashes, those gastrointestinal issues like pain or bloating, maybe some change in bowels. Maybe it's the brain fog or the joint pain. We know the inflammation is there. So what are we going to do about it? We're going to talk through some action steps. I want to give you some information that you can use to decrease the inflammation that's going to be in your system, because there are definitely ways that you can work to control this. So first one we're going to start with is, we're going to start with the food choices. I'm not sure if many of you know, but there's actually something called the anti-inflammatory diet. We even call it the autoimmune protocol in some people where it's used, but it's actually the same type of approach. It's incredibly well researched, it's well documented, and it does an amazing job at calming inflammatory diseases. Even without following this protocol real tightly, you can have a dramatic impact on inflammation in your system. So even without going super, super strict to the true anti-inflammatory diet, making some simple dietary changes will profoundly affect inflammation in your system. So an anti-inflammatory diet, it really favors fruits and vegetables, also foods containing omega-3 fatty acids, whole grains, in some people, proteins, healthy fats, and lots of different spices are typically used. It absolutely limits processed foods, sugars, and highly inflammatory foods. And we're going to cover a little bit more of those. So some foods just contain triggers that can worsen inflammation. Sugary and processed foods, huge on the list, some of the worst offenders, while whole foods are less likely to have this effect. So what I want you to do is focus on the foods that are outlined here, more of your fishes and fruits and dark green leafy veggies, nuts and seeds, fibers. What we want you to stay away from are the processed foods. So baked goods, those things instantly turn into sugar in your system. We have our processed snacks, foods that have a lot of added sugar to them, excess alcohol, and we're going to talk a little bit more about some of what those unhealthy oils are. I'm sure a lot of you have heard, if somebody says, oh, I don't eat gluten, and maybe someone around them says, oh, do you have celiac? And no, I don't have celiac, but gluten really bothers me. And some people say that's crazy, and other people are like, I totally get what you're saying. I wanted to go through why gluten is such an inflammatory molecule and why it bothers people even if they don't have celiac disease, which is a true allergy to the gliadin protein. The three biggies that I want you to understand, and I would love to challenge you to try to avoid for 30 days. Going to be gluten, processed carbs, and if you have in particular a lot of achy joints, sore muscles, your body that just hurts, I would challenge you to really cut out nightshades for 30 days. So let's talk a little bit about gluten. This is the first one. Gluten is what's called a prolamine protein. You don't have to remember the technical words, but feel free to come back and review this. So gluten is this prolamine protein. It's actually a toxic form of lectin, and it's commonly found in grains and some beans, and it's in the seeds of a lot of plants. Normally what happens is protein gets broken down before it's absorbed, not gluten. This prolamine protein, it gets into your body, and the cell of your intestinal tract thinks it looks like sugar. So it pulls it into the cell to use, and then it gets triggered when it realizes not only is it not sugar, but it's not even broken down. So it's really burdening the whole cellular process of that system. So think of it like this. Gluten is the wolf in sheep's clothing when it gets in your cells. The cell thinks it's going to love it, and instead all it does is kicks off an inflammatory reaction when it's actually not able to use it at all. The second category, processed carbs. These, just like sugar. So your body quickly absorbs these without needing any kind of work to break them down. They rush into your system. There's a spike in your blood sugar. You will hear me say over and over, blood sugar spikes trigger the most incredible inflammatory reaction. It hits your bloodstream and pow, like inflammation. So when people eat processed carbs a lot, imagine the chronic firing of that flame in your system. The third kind of unique category is this nightshades. So nightshades are plants that grow typically at night, which is fascinating to me. Those would be like tomatoes, white potatoes, eggplants, sweet and hot peppers. So like the yellows and the reds and the greens, but also the really spicy ones like jalapenos, and for all those crazy hot sauce people, ghost peppers. Now, it actually does not include black pepper. So, but if there's any chili-based spices out there, even including paprika, those are all considered that nightshade family. Those all come from these plants, and what makes them unique is the nightshade family has a really high component of lectins in them. So there's that word again, popping back up, lectins. Lectins are not broken down well, particularly the type in the nightshades. They get rapidly absorbed into the cell. There are these whole molecules that then trigger this reaction happening again. So when you have big things being absorbed into cells that are not broken down, huge trigger for inflammation. So nightshades have a very high level of lectins. They also have something in them called saponins, and these are like partner chemicals. So they work together with the immune system in kind of a negative way. They actually stimulate and over-exaggerate an immune response. So if somebody already has inflammation going on, in comes the saponins, the little partner in crime to inflammation, and actually revs up that reaction even higher. So gluten, processed carbs, and nightshades, 3 categories that you need to be aware of if you have any of those symptoms of what